For those who may or may not know me, my name is Allison Tate. I'm a certified financial planner. Just before this meeting, I was thinking that I have been working with business owners for most of my professional career. I started my career 10 years ago as let's say 20, 22 years ago. I guess I'm aging myself. So I started my career 22 years ago as a commercial banker for middle market companies with a bank in Chicago, where I would help provide them with loan financing anywhere between $5 to $20 million. As time went on, I really felt like I wanted to make more of a personal impact, and I changed careers to personal financial advising. And as I kind of entered that space, I worked with probably one of the largest firms, one of the largest wealth management firms in the country, where I was a financial advisor for C-suite executives of Fortune 1000 companies. I worked with executives at that time who had a net worth of anywhere from $1 million to $20 million on up. So you can imagine like the level of complexity and experience that I have is pretty deep. And I'm pretty skilled at taking people where they want to go financially. As I started, kind of continuing along that path and working with those C-suite executives, several of them ended up transitioning into entrepreneurship kind of like while we were working together. And that was very new, very exciting, very scary. Even for me, I'm sure it was scarier for them at the time, because they used me as their sounding board. And I really wanted to make sure that I could provide them with the information and education that they needed to help jumpstart their businesses. And all of them actually did like a hard pivot, like out of corporate America and into very different careers. Like some of them started retail stores, they started nonprofits, they started real estate flipping. I mean, they started consulting firms. They really just took a hard pivot out of corporate America and really did something that really fueled them and, fueled their dreams and allowed them to pursue their passions. And I was just so inspired by their courage to kind of just take that leap. And I saw all of them transition successfully into entrepreneurship. And then it just kind of encouraged me slowly over time to say, like, is it my turn? Like, I felt like it was my turn because I had already kind of coached them and helped them make all like the business decisions and help them do some tax planning on the entrepreneurial side. So I just said, you know what, I'm just going to take a leap of faith for myself and just try my hand at entrepreneurship. So 2 years ago, I launched my tax planning firm, which is a very tax planning, which is really designed to help business owners save money through strategic tax planning. And I also launched a wealth management business, which is a very wealth management, which also helps business owners, grow and protect their wealth. And that's a little bit of information about me. Throughout this presentation, you'll see a QR code in the bottom of your screen. If you scan that at any time during our presentation, it'll take you to my calendar link where you can schedule just like a free 30-minute call with me. If you have any questions about this presentation or just something else going on in your financial life that you want to discuss. All right, so tonight's presentation will be about how to protect your dream with insurance. So let's just start at the beginning and very high level. What is insurance? To me, at its core, insurance is effectively kind of like offloading your risk from either a personal or business perspective to that of an insurance carrier. And by you shifting that risk off to an insurance carrier, they'll say, we'll take the risk, but you have to pay us a premium. And effectively, you kind of putting that insurance in place gives you the protection and safety that lets you continue your day-to-day life. And if something unexpected happens, you know that you can kind of lean on that insurance to help fill any gaps that you might have. The reason why insurance is so important and that you want to have, adequate coverage is particularly as a business owner, like you're so vulnerable because like if you have like one or two hiccups or like if someone sues you or if you have a business with inventory and somehow maybe there's a flood and it gets damaged, you are responsible for making ends meet, right? And like recovering from that loss. And depending upon like what the size of that loss actually is, it could drain all of your cash reserves, which could make it very challenging for you to remain competitive or even stay in business. So you want to make sure that you have adequate insurance to protect your like risk exposure at all times. So let's talk a little bit about your insurance risk and needs. So when you're kind of looking at establishing an insurance program, basically you want to sit down and say, okay, well, what are all of my current assets and liabilities? What are the assets and liabilities of my business? Like how much income is my business generating each year? You also want to look at your industry to say, okay, like what kind of risk might be around, kind of like floating around in my particular industry, because everyone has maybe some different risks that they might be exposed to depending upon what line of work they're in. And so, kind of looking at the potential liability that exists within your industry, I think is like the first step to identifying where any gaps might be in your coverage. So, for example, if anyone is brave and wants to just drop in the chat what their business is and like what they do for a living, I'll help you kind of do that insurance assessment really quickly. Is anybody brave? Okay. All right. So we have a brave soul. Thank you, Letitia. So vending machine operator. So do you run that business by yourself or do you have partners? Solo. Okay. Do you have contracts for your vending machines? Okay. So you're in some type of physical location? Got it. Okay. All right. So just kind of thinking about solopreneur in the vending machine business, like the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, so it's like general risk and liability, right? So let's just say you were going out to restock a machine and the machine falls on you or happens to fall on someone standing next to you. That person could sue you or you could become injured. Some other things to keep in mind are just what if something happens with the person that you have the contract with? What if it goes left? What if they try to sue you? You need to be able to protect yourself from, any type of potential lawsuit coming from the person that you have contracts with. Um, if you have inventory, right? So like whatever you're stocking in the vending machines, wherever you were storing those items, that inventory, what if there was a flood, fire, some other type of damage, and all of those goods kind of got wiped out and you had to rebuy them? That basically disrupts your business, it disrupts your revenue. And so you want to have insurance in place to kind of safeguard you from all of those potential risks. Okay. So that's how you would kind of evaluate what your insurance needs might be, because you want to identify where those gaps are based upon your industry and then find insurance to plug those gaps. So let's talk a little bit about the various types of business insurance. And I would think these are probably the most popular. There's a lot of like nuances of these, but I tend to see these the most. So there's general liability insurance, property insurance, business interruption insurance. I don't think many people are aware of, but it does exist. There's also workers' compensation insurance, professional liability insurance, key person insurance, and cybersecurity insurance. So I'll just kind of go into each of these with a little bit more detail. So let's talk about general liability insurance. So think of like general liability insurance as kind of like your overarching umbrella for insurance to kind of like protect you from just about every risk. I would say if you are a business owner, you must have at a minimum general liability insurance, or else you are putting yourself and your business at a considerable risk. And like tomorrow morning, you need to make a phone call to make sure that you get this insurance in place for your business. So at a very high level, general liability insurance will protect you from if someone gets injured, whether it be on your physical like work location or if you're doing work for someone else. So let's just say you're going to stock those vending machines at this particular site or this particular business where you have a contract arrangement. You go to their site and you get injured. General liability would protect you from, whatever your loss might be at that time. It protects you from having something happen to like inventory or property or equipment that you might have. So it's kind of like your overarching risk and kind of like your bare minimum level of insurance that's needed for every business. Something else I wanted to mention here is that if there are any like people who do like coaching work or speaking engagements with corporations, or you have contracts with, large organizations, particularly those in like, the Fortune 500, 1000 companies. If you come in and do any type of work for them and they hire you to do this work, they're going to expect that you have at least probably $2 million of general liability insurance to come to even like step foot on their property or even like accept the deal, because they want to make sure that you are adequately protected in case something happens to you or you damage some of their equipment. So that's just something to keep in mind. In addition to like if you happen to be like a minority owned business or a woman owned business and kind of going after those certifications, they're going to want to see a substantial amount of general liability insurance. So let's talk a little bit about property insurance. So property insurance is really needed, like an additional kind of rider, if you will, for property insurance would be if you have inventory, you have a physical like brick and mortar, you have a warehouse, you have just some type of physical location with like inventory equipment that you want to protect from loss. Property insurance would kind of come in if any of those items get damaged from, fire, flood, theft, those types of risks. Business interruption insurance is a little like lesser known type of insurance, but I think probably we would all agree that our realistic example of how business interruption insurance could be valuable would be through COVID. So just think about if you had a brick and mortar coffee shop and it was the start of COVID and it's the start of the shutdown. Well, you can no longer serve coffee, potentially to your customers. Like if you didn't have a drive-through, like no one could physically come in your store, you touch them and, give them coffee. So that interrupts your business operations, that interrupts your revenue, it stops your revenue for a certain or unknown time period. If you had business interruption insurance, basically it would kind of like give you the money that you would have generated in your business during that same time period. So like, let's just say, for example, your coffee shop were to bring in, I don't know, $10,000 a week. That insurance protection could potentially replace that income for you. Workers' compensation insurance does depend by state, but I'll just speak from like the Georgia level because that's where I am and that's what I know the best. So if you are a solopreneur, this doesn't really apply to you. You don't need to have workers' comp insurance. But as your business continues to grow, and let's just say you add on some actual employees, whether they be part-time or even some full-time employees. So even like part-time employees count in this calculation. So in Georgia, you need to have, if you have like 3 employees, even if they are part-time, you have to have workers' compensation insurance. And like I said, every state varies, but that threshold for number of employees is fairly low in most states because they want to make sure that if you are employing someone and they get injured while on the job, there is insurance to, not only protect you in case that person sues you, to have that person recover some lost wages while they are recuperating. And also, just to give them some type of, just benefits during that time period that they otherwise may not have access to because they aren't working. So I would say if you have employees, definitely check your state rules to see if you have, if you meet the criteria for that workers' comp requirement. Next, I want to talk a little bit about professional liability insurance. So if you are a service provider, a coach, consultant, CPA, anyone who is giving advice to anyone else, you want to have professional liability insurance, which is otherwise known as errors and omissions insurance. And this insurance is really there to protect you if maybe you failed to give bad advice, maybe you didn't deliver the proper instructions to your client, and maybe they implemented something incorrectly because you failed to give them like all of the information, or maybe they even interpreted something different than what you told them to do. But nonetheless, it created a financial loss for them, and they could turn around and sue you. So if you are, again, offering any type of advice, coaching, consulting, tax preparation, even myself as a financial advisor, I have to have errors and omission insurance. Let's talk a little bit about key person insurance. Now, this one comes in like a different form, like different forms. Let's just say, for example, you have a larger organization. And let's just say you have an organizational structure that consists of like your president, CEO, someone who's like head of your sales and marketing, someone who's head of like your R&D. And something happens to like your head of sales and marketing. Maybe they become injured on the job and they now have a disability and can no longer work. Well, because that person is so key to your business and driving revenue to your business, it's a disruption to your operations. And so if you had any type of key man insurance, it would kind of step in to provide your business with income so that you could potentially go out and find another person to kind of replace them. It also gives you, time. That money gives you time to do your proper research, make sure you find the proper person, the proper fit for your business, get them up and running, get them through training, and then they're ready to kind of go ahead and start working. So having that insurance available would help kind of bridge that gap and help make sure that there's some type of continuity in your business. This insurance is also important just to make sure that you can keep like a good face, like you can still put on a good face to, all of your clients, to, your broader constituents, because they know that it didn't really stop operations. Next, I'll talk about cybersecurity insurance. So in today's world, I think we all are just like hyper vigilant that like there is always someone out there trying to steal your information. And, as a business owner, if you have, client names, client phone numbers, client emails, client account numbers, you have access to some pretty sensitive information. And as a business, you have to make sure that you're safeguarding all of that critical information in the best way possible. Just for myself, like even today, like I got a phone call and it said it was from like a healthcare company. And they said, "Oh, we're calling to schedule a doctor's appointment with you. But before we can schedule it, can you tell me your name and your date of birth?" And I'm like, "You're calling me to schedule an appointment. Like, why do I have to tell you my name and my date of birth?" And even though it might have been completely legitimate, I didn't ask for the phone call. I didn't ask for the appointment. And so all I did was hang up, because I'm certainly not going to give you all of my information, or you might be recording me saying yes or no. And a lot of times that information is enough to kind of like gain access to some other personal information, or maybe my own personal information. So like, I just don't play around with anything I don't recognize. I don't click on emails I don't recognize. But again, if you have client information in your possession, make sure that you are doing everything you can to secure that. If it's in the cloud, make sure it's just everything is as secure as possible. Try to put like VPNs on your computers just to kind of like disguise your internet activity. Just whatever, firewalls, just whatever you can think of, really kind of, maybe depending upon your industry, you might actually need to hire someone in IT to kind of come in tell you where your vulnerabilities are and give you suggestions on how to beef up those areas. But I think even with like the best work and the best security, I think we're all slightly vulnerable because just the criminals continue to get more and more sophisticated by like the hour. So you want to make sure that your business has some type of, cybersecurity insurance protection to protect you against whether it's client information theft or maybe you were the victim of some kind of like ransomware attack. So we kind of went over like just like a very high level of some very common forms of business insurance. When I kind of introduced this topic in social media about a month ago, I got a lot of questions about one particular area of like just like a business that I really wanted to address, and I think is best addressed potentially with life insurance. So I wanted to just add in the segment of how business owners could potentially leverage life insurance for their benefit. And this would be in the form of, let's call it a buy sell agreement. And this would be a buy sell agreement. I'm thinking specifically if you were to pass away. So we all have businesses, all of our businesses have value. You may not feel like it does today because you're still kind of growing and still building, but that your business has value today, and somebody out here would pay for what you've created. So whether you have clients today, somebody would pay for access to your client list. If you have contracts today with guaranteed revenue, I bet you somebody would buy those contracts and step into that revenue. So you want to make sure that you are kind of thinking ahead to say, okay, it's not just all about me. We won't be here forever. But like, what happens to our business when we're no longer here? So because your business is an asset, some people don't think about this, but like when you pass away, your business actually is a part of your estate. And as things kind of flow through your estate, if your business is not, if there's not a clear plan on how your business is to be transferred at your passing, it's just going to flow down to your heirs. And let's just say you have a business with two other people, maybe your friends, and all of you all are married. And let's just say, you pass away, your spouse would inherit your business. So let's just think about that for a second. Would your spouse even want to own your business? Would your spouse want to run the day-to-day activities in the business? Is it even something that they're even interested in? Would they even be the best person to kind of step in and fill your shoes? Maybe they are. And maybe they're kind of working alongside you as they're building the business. But maybe they have their own career or own passion and own dreams that don't align with that business. But now they just inherited this business that they're legally responsible for because they own part of it. Having a buy-sell agreement in place basically tells everyone how your business would be transferred upon your disability, death, or at your retirement. So again, let's just kind of think about the space of you passing away. If you had a buy-sell agreement in place, maybe your other two partners want to step up and buy your share of the business. But let's just say they may not have the cash at the time to do that. Well, if you each got life insurance on each other, that life insurance would be available to your business partners to buy your share of the business. And then they would just keep it amongst the two of them. That's one way how business owners can really leverage life insurance to make sure that there's, still continuity in the business, that that business still has a future. You can also, in that buy-sell agreement, it also basically establishes a price for your business. Again, your client contracts, your client list, your equipment, your inventory, all of those things have value and somebody would pay for them. So if you think that it's time to, get a buy-sell agreement in place, there's like a lot of people that you would need to bring into that process. So number one, you'd have to determine like how much your business is actually worth. So you would need to get someone who's an expert in business valuation. You would need to get your accountant involved, your tax strategist. You definitely have to get an attorney involved to draft the document. You need a life insurance agent if you're using life insurance as the way for someone to buy your ownership share. And you also need a financial advisor to help like quarterback all of those conversations and making sure that every decision that's being made is in your best interest and kind of fits in with your financial and tax plan. So when you think about, structuring your insurance, there's not a one size fits all approach. The way that I think, you should approach this situation is really just to kind of sit down with a financial advisor, have the discussion about your business, your industry, your sales, your future revenue projections, and the insurance that you have today. And kind of we can look, I can look at those underlying limits and tell you whether or not they're sufficient based upon where your business is today. And, if there's a gap in coverage, then we need to fill it. So either we fill it by you self-funding it, by saying like, okay, I understand that there is this risk of exposure, but I have enough cash on hand and I'm comfortable covering that risk should something go wrong. That's fine. If you want to self-insure and you have the cash flow and are comfortable using it in that way, by all means. But most people don't want to do that. They're going to offload that risk to an insurance company. And so we just have to figure out the amount of coverage that you're willing to pay for to reduce that gap. And there may be instances where maybe you still self-insure, but perhaps it's a much smaller amount that you're more comfortable paying. So I think at a high level, I want to, just let you know that working with a professional, so like working with a financial advisor and you're in business insurance professional, and you, like the three of us, could come up with the proper insurance program for you that kind of bridges the gap to cover any areas of risk for a price point that you're comfortable paying. So that's something that I can do for my clients and have done in the past. So that was the end of our presentation. Very quick one tonight. But, I want to let you know that I am available to, research and kind of look through your current insurance program to determine whether or not there's any gaps and figure out who we can, kind of bring in to help fill those gaps for you. With that, I will open it up to any questions. Either you can come off mute or drop a question in the chat.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry, someone else has their hand up before I did. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You can go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, good afternoon, Ms. Tate. This is Tawana Terry. Just for the sake of the room, I am a new business owner, or maybe I should take myself off of. Hello. For the sake of the room, I am a new business owner. Journey to Excellence is my business. And I have a question concerning, so you used in your example or discussion, you mentioned two different types of insurance. You mentioned the general insurance coverage versus the professional liability insurance. My question is, would someone with a service business such as mine would need both insurances, or would it be one or the other? Just want to make sure I'm understanding clearly.
So good question. I think you would need both. So even though I'm a service provider, my insurance is general liability, but also I have an E&O component. And I think the general liability is there just like I have computer equipment. I have pieces of technology, in my office, in my space. I have a physical office. I think there are too many things that could happen unexpectedly that I would just want to make sure that I had something in place for just any type of broad level of risk. And then that E&O component is super important, as a service provider if you're giving advice to anyone. So I recommend that you get both. The difference is so nowadays, I guess depending upon when you started your business and when you get the insurance, some programs will actually include an E&O component within their general liability insurance. So I think that's why it's important that someone come in and review your insurance program, because you might, or in your general liability insurance, you may already have kind of underlying limits for property damage. You may have underlying limits for cybersecurity. You may have underlying limits for E&O already. So you wouldn't necessarily want to buy a separate policy if you have enough coverage within your general liability policy. But because every carrier is different, every insurance package is different, that's why you want to make sure that you are, asking your carrier the right questions and going through those declaration pages to make sure that it actually is the policy that you need that covers all of your risk.
Okay, and you could work with us in determining if you don't have any insurance, in determining what's the best insurance and what's the way to go based on our individual needs.
Yeah. So if you're just starting a business, as you mentioned, and you're saying okay, I need something, I know I need general liability, I know I need E&O, then let's have that conversation about your specific industry, what risk may be unique to you, what your revenue projections are for the next, let's say 2 to 3 years. Because you do want to review your insurance program at least every 3 years to make sure that it's still kind of keeping up to date with all of your new, business activity and growth. But I can certainly sit down, kind of have that initial conversation and then point you in the direction of, at least 3 business carriers that you could reach out to. And then we could all have conversations together, once they provide their proposals.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Letitia?
Hey, good evening, everyone. My question was regarding the workers' comp insurance. Is that applicable for W-2 employees only or both W-2 and 1099?
Only W-2 employees. Great question.
Awesome.
If they're a contractor, you're off the hook in Georgia.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay, no questions. Or if you don't feel comfortable, asking your questions, or if you have a question just about how you can save money on taxes, are you making the right investment decisions for yourself and your business? Whatever, if it's something financial related, ask me about it. It is free to have a conversation. You can scan the QR code here to schedule that free 30-minute call. I'd be happy to help you. And, kind of keeping along the lines of our kind of monthly webinar series. So next month's topic will be dedicated to all things estate planning. So if you have the time, you can join me October 24th, which is another Tuesday at 6 p.m., where we'll be discussing kind of all things estate planning. I think generally the topic can be a little overwhelming and scary for a lot of people. And I think and also people don't want to face their own mortality. But if you're willing to kind of just bear with me and kind of just take the risk because you know that you need the protection for yourself and your family, because you don't want to pass away and kind of leave them in this state of chaos, then, join me next month where we will kind of sit down. We'll go through all the questions that you need to have answered to kind of prepare your estate plan. And you don't have to go to some super expensive attorney to get an estate plan prepared. I think the landscape has changed so much that there are a lot more fintech tools that financial advisors like myself have access to that can help you create the estate plan without an attorney. I would say the caveat is your estate needs to be simple enough to use one of those electronic tools. So if you for example, if it's just you, if it's just you, or it's just you and your spouse or you and your child, you might have a home, you have a business, maybe you have, you have an investment account. Like that's a relatively simple estate to settle. Like more complicated estates would be if you had real estate outside of your home state. So let's just say I'm in Georgia. Let's just say you had rental properties in Florida, in California. That's now a complex situation. Or if you have a special needs child, you absolutely have to get an attorney to draft that document, because how they receive benefits could impact their ability to receive state aid. And computer tools are just not going to be able to handle that type of complexity. But simple estates can totally be done like on a Sunday rainy afternoon if you have all of these questions answered. So scan the QR code to register for next month's webinar. I hope to see you there. And with that, thank you all for your time. For those who came and joined me, there will be a recording of this presentation that will go out in the coming days. So if you missed anything, feel free to look at that, or please reach out and contact me if you have questions. You do not need to tackle any of this stuff alone.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye. Feel free to reach out to me via email or phone.